when I'm dying, to me that's great, but it doesn't help anybody else. So when people say, well, this or that, we're all people living on this planet. We all need to respect this planet. I mean, everybody says the native people respected the planet. Well, they lived because that's all they had was the planet, the ground that they stood on. They ate whatever was there, period. Whether it was alligators, fish, or vegetables. I mean, they ate what was there. But they had fires burning. And if the native nation wasn't destroyed, which there was 50 million native people here 400 years ago, now it's less than 750,000, if it would have been that many staying here, the smoke alone would have destroyed the ozone of the planet. All right, fires are the worst thing to the ozone, which people don't realize. When there's a fire in California, when there's a fire burning, that's destroying the ozone at a great level. So what I'm trying to say, we think other people are better. We think we give other people credit. No, we're all people, and we all need to respect and work together. We can create something that's real. Well, my time's going to be cut off. I'm glad you called in. I appreciate it. And hope to talk again. I see your name in the chat room. I try to say that because some people do like to attack people just for any reason. And I'm not attacking for any reason. I always defend the truth. Or try to bring it out and help people see that there is a truth there if they want to look for it and find it. So it was a pleasure, everybody out there listening. Hawk's Blood here, calling from the big island of Hawaii. I don't know what's going on with the time frame. I should have been cut off already. But I do appreciate it, everybody. Enjoyed. I hope you got something out of the show. If not, email me, call me. hawksblood1@AOL.com. I do reply to all my emails. Good, better, and different. So have a great day. I hope to talk again. Next week will be close to Easter, so I will be going closer to the what Jesus was to me and what it was for everybody, and how it relates to what's going on. So with that, everybody, have a great day. Thanks for calling in. I don't know who's up next, but thank you, everybody. Love and light.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. This is Deb. I think we're live. I'm having a little trouble on Skype here, so I hope we're live.
It says we're live.
All right, because I didn't hear the intro, so it was kind of weird. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to add our guest, who is Linda Howe. Linda is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communication, and she is an Emmy award-winning TV producer and a scientific reporter.
Hello, this is Linda.
We're doing the intro. She's the founder of Earth Files, an award-winning news site, and since 1999 has presented real news on science and the environment. She's the recipient of dozens of awards for TV production and journalism, and her site Earth Files was awarded the W3 Silver Award for Excellence in a news category, among many other awards, too numerous to mention here in our introduction. She's also the author of 4 books and is a frequent guest on many TV shows, including Ancient Aliens and other Discovery Channel shows. So, Linda, welcome so much to the show today. We're so excited to have you come on and to talk about some of the information that you'll be presenting at the upcoming UFO conference and some other things that you've been working on over the last several decades.
Well, thank you very much. The Eureka Springs Conference has meant a lot to those of us who have been interested in hard physical evidence and eyewitnesses, because all the way back to around 1989, when Lou Farish, God rest his soul, began what was a sequence of conferences in which we who were doing hard investigative work out in the world having to do with a wide range of subjects like animal mutilations and eventually crop formations and the human abduction syndrome and a whole host of other Earth mysteries, we ended up in those first years of the Eureka Springs Conference literally coming together off of the airplane, in the cars, getting to our rooms where we were all freshly talking about brand new events that were occurring, and we came together in Eureka Springs to spend a weekend where we were sharing hot news, so to speak, and that is the historic beginning of what today is considered one of the best and most enjoyable conferences, I think, at Eureka Springs at that Ozark Conference Center. And this will be, I was trying to figure it out, I've been to every one since then except one, so I think this is my 25th or so journey to Eureka Springs to meet with people who are interested enough to try to learn something more each year about subjects that are considered politically unacceptable in some governments.
Yeah, and Dolores Cannon, I think, has been a real champion with helping to bring forward a lot of this information as well. And her daughter, Julia, will be hosting this year, so it's exciting.
Yeah, Dolores picked up wonderfully 2 years ago after the passing of Lou Farish. And so it was interesting that we all were so, our energy and our hope and our spirit was that the conference could keep going on. And now with the passing of Dolores, God bless her, whatever dimension she is in, that her family are keeping going this incredible conference.
So what will you be presenting at the conference that is coming up there April 10th? You'll be talking about the Rendlesham Forest updates?
Yes. There is material that I have never shared publicly before, and I'm going to, it's called New Bentwater Revelations, more Bentwater Revelations. I'm speaking from 2:30 to 4 p.m. on Saturday on April 11th, and there are a whole series of very important, actually, I think, groundbreaking events that have occurred just since December to January, and that it involves John Burroughs, who was an airman back in December 1980 at RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, and he is the only person at what was then NATO's largest air base in Europe. It was John Burroughs, an airman first class in December of 1980, who for 2 different nights was involved close up to lights and beams in Rendlesham Forest that ran along the big air base, and that outsiders, meaning people who were on the outside or in Central Security Control, dealing with radar and trying to get radio communication on the first night with 3 men who just literally dropped off of communication for 45 to 50 minutes. That was documented and reported by Central Security Control. Meanwhile, during that period of time, John Burroughs was one of the men in the forest where they were chasing after colored lights, trying to identify what they were. And what is so interesting is that over all of these years, John Burroughs and others have been haunted by what they encountered in that forest. But he has never once, even with many hypnosis sessions that I've helped him arrange over the last 20-some years, he has never been able to clearly break through some block in his mind about what happened. And it is only recently that a very highly classified UK investigation of non-ionizing radiation measured coming off of what the UK government has long called unidentified aerial phenomena, which in the United States and Canada we have called UFOs since the 40s. The UK has said unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. And they did an intense investigation. It is very clear that when somebody decided that all of this research into non-ionizing radiation and its impact on human tissue and brain waves and minds would be released or unclassified in 2006 for the very first time, it was almost as if there was some political pressure, but that the military and the MOD in England really didn't want the world to know. And it was unclassified without any publicity. There was no one knew. It was a leaker only a couple of years ago from England who made us, meaning those of us who were trying to get to the bottom of RAF Bentwaters, aware that here was this highly classified, in detail, 460-page report that goes into an exhaustive investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena, the types of non-ionizing radiation that they emit, and what they have learned about the impact of that non-ionizing radiation on humans, and that in that category, John Burroughs, Jim Penniston, Ed Kovansak on December 26, 1980, fall in that category, but especially John Burroughs and Jim Penniston, who were very close to light and even a craft. And what is a very interesting footnote here is going all the way back to 1984, when the very first stories finally were coming out because of an interview that had been done in England. News of the World had talked with a man that they ran with a pseudonym, Art Wallace, and it was actually Larry Warren, who was at the air base and who participated in one of the phenomena in one of the nights. And with the release of information by the News of the World, here came this piece that was a surprise to everybody. And it was that December 26th, after midnight, that the radar operations and Central Security Control at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, NATO's largest base at the time, that they had communicated with Heathrow radar, and that they knew that there was something unidentified that Heathrow had picked up and was moving fast into Rendlesham Forest. They knew that. And that was part of the reason, because Heathrow had reported this radar bogey going right down into where RAF Bentwaters was in Suffolk County, Woodbridge in England, that when lights were reported in the forest, they were trying at the base to decide, has an airplane gone down? Is there a fire? Or what are we dealing with? And that's why John Burroughs, Jim Penniston, and Ed Kovansak went out into the forest with permission in the first place from Central Security Control, because CSC wanted to find out if this had something to do with the radar information from Heathrow. And when they got into the forest, Ed Kovansak was ordered to stay with the truck because they couldn't move with the truck any further. It was a very, very dense forest. So they kept him there. Jim Penniston and John Burroughs went on their own, ended up getting close to lights, running after lights, having a blast of white light overcome them at a point in the forest. And here is where their memories diverge. Jim Penniston remembers a blasting white light, and out of the white light came this black, glassy triangle about 7 to 9 feet long. And John Burroughs has no more memory. He doesn't remember anything else. To show you why this 2006 unclassified report about the impact of non-ionizing radiation coming off of unidentified aerial phenomena becomes so important and is one of the hearts, a smoking gun right now in 2015, is the men have never remembered the same thing, but in that missing time there were rumors that some people saw either a figure or a man going up in a beam of light. And that is where the phrase that I heard in 1984 when CNN was working on the first series about RAF Bentwaters, and they had reported that somebody said that they thought John Burroughs either jumped up on a flying saucer or was taken up in a beam of light. That finally explains that phrase, that rumor that went all the way back to the News of the World in that period of time in 1984. So John doesn't remember and has never been able to break through, but it is no question that he must have been closely exposed, as with Jim Penniston. And then 2 nights later, on December 28th, John Burroughs was back in that forest, and there was a sergeant at the time, Adrian Bustinza, who remembers going with John Burroughs toward lights again, and that this Adrian Bustinza said that the lights came close over John Burroughs, that Adrian Bustinza felt that there was something from the lights or something held him and he fell down to the ground, and that as he fell, he saw a red-orange light engulf, and that was the word engulf, surround John Burroughs. What is so interesting is that that night on the 28th, there were more than a dozen men in Rendlesham Forest there with the intent to measure any radiation in the forest, to monitor the lights and the beams. The Deputy Base Commander, Charles Halt himself, has spoken on the record firsthand that one of the beams of light that night came down to the ground 3 feet from his shoes, and he interpreted that as an act of aggression, whether it was or not. And that all of those people who were involved on that second night, nobody remembers all the details the same there either, but John Burroughs knows that he was there. He remembers going with the Sergeant Bustinza toward the lights, and what Bustinza remembers about the red light coming over and engulfing John Burroughs, Burroughs does not know what happened. And so all these years, in all these efforts to do hypnosis and to try to break through, and it's been unsuccessful, that suddenly the release of this UK classified document that I will be focusing on as part of the work that I'm going to be doing at the Eureka Springs Conference on April 11th is from this enormously detailed and important smoking gun report about the fact that the UK government and the US government have known all since 1980 and probably before that we are dealing with phenomena that is not terrestrial, that we are dealing with technologies that are highly advanced. And if you jump over to what Jim Penniston began discussing in 2010 to 11 for the first time when I was working with Ancient Aliens on TV production, and Jim Penniston and John Burroughs and I were doing work together, and we went to England together with Ancient Aliens. It was Jim Penniston who began to reveal details about actually touching this black triangular object that seemed to emerge out of this blast of white light, feeling that as he dragged his fingers along that it felt glassy, it felt warmer than the surrounding very cold December humid temperature in the forest, that when he walked all the way around and dragged his fingers over the front vertex area, there were raised symbols. He thought of Braille, meaning anything that would be raised so that the fingers could feel it above the flat surface and get meaning from it. And as he dragged his fingers over those raised symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones, and he had a telepathic communication, which he had not talked about through all those years until we were working on the Ancient Aliens production and had gone to England, that he had a telepathic download that the black glassy object and the lights were related to time travelers who were in a survival crisis 40 to 50,000 years in the future, sophisticated enough to be able to move through the universe and move through time, and for reasons that are not clear to him, were coming back to Earth in 1980 to gather some kind of genetic material to use as quote-unquote Band-Aids to keep their civilization going. Now, the assumption that Jim had was it was us 50,000 years in the future where the end of civilization was near because of some DNA problem, and that they had the sophistication to come back in time to collect genetic material that would be from a period before something happened that set them onto this extinction course. Now, that shows you how complex and many-faceted the R.E.F. Bantwaters Woodbridge subject has been since it first occurred December 1980, and that more is coming out in 2015 in many ways than it has ever before now. And that is part of what I will be sharing at the Eureka Springs Conference, and I'm delighted to announce that John Burroughs will be joining me for one of my segments.
That's truly amazing, and it's so good that they're here to continue to tell that story, and that you're along with them to continue reporting it. Wasn't there a translation of those zeros and ones that he was able to remember? He had recorded them in a notebook, and wasn't it somehow translated, or not?
How this happened? Ancient Aliens, the production crew, Jim Peniston, John Burroughs, and I were in Phoenix, Arizona in the fall of 2010 recording segments for the Ancient Aliens TV series. And during the late afternoon of the production, complete surprise and shock to John Burroughs, to me, to everyone there. Peniston said, "Did I ever show you my notebook from the night in the forest?" And he had a briefcase that he had not gone into or talked about or anything during our interviews. And he opened it up and pulled out this clearly older leather-bound type of book, notebook, lined paper in it. He had investigated many air crashes in England when he was in the Air Force, and he was famous for always carrying a notebook that he would take to air crashes or something that was happening, and he would always make sketches and make his notes in notebooks, and Jim Peniston was known for that. So now he is opening up this notebook that he has identified as the same one that he had in Rendlesham Forest on December 26, 1980, and flips to the very back, and there are half a dozen pages of nothing but zeros and ones. And we are all looking at it, and he said, I would like to see if you could get this translated. And I'm a science and environment reporter who gets into Real X-Files. The Ancient Alien production people were there. We were doing a story, and they see this and said, Linda, you have people who can take these zeros and ones and see what you can find out. And they, Ancient Aliens production, they would take the zeros and ones. Peniston allowed us to have copies and see what we would come up with. Because now, remember, for the audience listening, binary code is broken up in, there are different types, but usually 6 or 8 sections of zeros and ones that relate to alphabet and number codes that have been used for a long time. If you have nothing but an ongoing, endless 6 or 7 pages of nothing but zeros and ones just going constantly with no breaks and nothing indicating, then you have to go and experiment and try to find out if you break them down into quantities of 6 or 8 or something, will you get any known letters or numbers in binary code? So that's what the scientists that I work with and what the computer guy that Ancient Aliens worked with, and we came up with that we were dealing with a kind of message that I have reported about. You can go to my news website, earthfiles.com, and in quick search you can type in RAF Bentwaters, and you can see the some 30, 40 reports that I have done about all of this investigation of RAF Bentwaters. And in the first week of January 2011, I did a series of reports on the binary code, our trip to England, and in that series of Earth Files reports, you can see all of the translations, and you can see that a former astronomer who built telescopes in Tucson for the university there in Arizona, he took a great interest in this, and he did a great deal of work. And both sides, Ancient Aliens and the astronomer, we came up with the same sort of translation and latitudes and longitudes. And the astronomer that I was working with said it would make sense that whatever this black glassy object was, not manned, it would be in the category of a self-activating software, hardware, like a drone today, that was here on some sort of a work mission, and that it would be functioning on this planet, perhaps projecting out latitudes and longitudes wherever it was and receiving information back. That was the astronomer's point of view. Jim Peniston thought that the latitudes and longitudes were related to very specific places on this planet that linked the time travelers to knowledge about this planet in the past, that the past and the future were somehow linked around these latitudes and longitudes. And it remains unresolved to this day, because there even was an argument about interpretations from the unbroken strings of zeros and ones, whether one latitude, longitude was the town center of Woodbridge, or it was further west off the coast of Europe. So you can see that if you don't have a guidance by whatever the intelligence was that put the zeros and ones into Peniston's head, and he put it in a notebook and doesn't tell anybody for 33 years or so, that you can have this problem of interpretation on the zeros and ones. And that is sort of where that research was left, because to date, nobody has had the money to go around the world to investigate the latitude longitudes outside of Google Map. And even then, it's an issue of if you fly someplace and you don't have guidance by the intelligence that put the zeros and ones in Sergeant Peniston's head as to why and the significance, and if one is in the ocean and one is in the middle of China, which is the case, what do you do? And
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's ongoing. So it's fascinating to know that there's still more information we can find out from that event, which is probably leading us down, the path of new knowledge and new revelation. So it's exciting. I want to switch gears for a minute, Linda, and ask you about some of the other work that you've done. Your 4 books are very on very interesting topics, and I know your latest book is on the mysterious lights in the crop circles. Can you give us a little glimpse into what that book is revealing, and the whole sort of the crop circle enigma?
Yeah, everything has sort of grown in evolutionary steps from going all the way back to 1979 when I was director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver, Colorado. And my job was to explore science, environment, and medical issues that would affect the state of Colorado. And I did 2 or 3 documentaries a year. I did news segments, and I did live studio programs. And it was in the summer of 1979 when I was working on one subject that I had a crew that had come off of a ABC New York network investigation of the then mysterious, bloodless, trackless animal mutilations, and I'm sitting listening to a crew person talk about it, and some of the animals had been found in circles, meaning that the pastures were either totally, the circle was hard, like ceramic, where the rest of the land around where the animal was lying in a circle was like normal soil and grass. Where some of the mutilated animals were found, it was hard-packed like ceramic, as if it had been exposed to some sort of microwave or other radiation. And as I listened to my audio guy talking about the work that he had done on the ABC network investigation of animal mutilations, I decided that I wanted to find out what was going on in the state of Colorado. And that led to my doing the documentary that was a 90-minute special on Channel 7 in Denver on May 25th, 1980, called A Strange Harvest. From that, it provoked so much feedback with people around the world at a time when there were no computers and no faxes. Everybody was communicating only by phones and hard-written letters, that I knew that I was scratching the surface of something that was global and that it was so complex that in all of these thousands of letters and many, many phone calls that came to me at the station, I was hearing stories about the strange circles and patterns in pastures. I was hearing about missing time. I was hearing from people who said that at midnight going out to attend the birth of a calf, that a beam of light came down out of the sky and surrounded them in a pasture, and these are salt of the earth, common-sense ranchers who are having experiences that no one hears about or heard about because people are terrified to talk about any of this because they will risk ridicule and being called names by their fellow human beings if they describe any of this high strangeness. And as the 80s moved on, I was doing science, I was doing medicine, I was doing environment, the beats I'd always been in since I graduated from Stanford University with a master's degree in communication in '68. That's the beat I was always in, but I was living this parallel life, usually at night, where I was trying to keep up with the phone calls in the mail and reaching out to people who were sending photographs, were sending documents, were sending extraordinary material, and I began expanding beyond the work that I was still doing at Channel 7 and sort of laying the foundations for hoping to go on and do more investigations of what law enforcement are the ones who told me in 79 to 80, the perpetrators of the animal mutilations are creatures from outer space, quote unquote. That was what I kept hearing off the record. They would not stand in front of a camera and say that until one man working for the district attorney's office down in Trinidad, Colorado, Lou Girotto, said that with my camera running one night in October of 1979, that he and other investigators had come to the conclusion that the perpetrators of the animal mutilations were creatures from outer space, and everybody, including me, wanted to know if this were true, what would be the reason. So now moving forward in time with this as background and having that film, A Strange Harvest, out in the world and receiving a regional Emmy and other awards for it, I kept trying to get to the bottom of different facets. And by the time of around 1990, I was in Los Angeles supervising producer on a pilot that became the Sighting series on television. And that was the year that crop formations in England were being suddenly talked about and shown, and Barbara Walters on 2020 and a whole host of the various network people kept showing these aerial pictures of crop formations and describing this huge mystery. And that is why I made my first trip to England in 1992 to get inside of this amazingly beautiful but perplexing phenomena, and I became convinced in the summer of 1992 that when you get to something that is 410 feet long, complex, 7 layers deep, with structure in 7 layers, the most unbelievably complex, and nobody being in the patterns, and farmers knowing that this 410-foot long, 7-layered pattern was not there the afternoon before and is there at sunup. This is impossible. Survey engineers that I've interviewed say that a lot of the patterns that have occurred overnight in England might take a week or 2 weeks to lay out, and let alone execute. So we were dealing with a true mystery, a true phenomena, and we dealt with this also in the pilot for sightings. And then I started going to England every year, documenting, working with a biophysicist in the United States, W.C. Levengood, and others, trying to document again, as I've tried in my career, hard physical evidence about why these formations had biophysical and biochemical changes that could not be done with people going out with sticks and boards. And eventually, in the year 1999, I had a publisher who contacted me about working on a book that would be about all this work that I had been doing investigating crop formations. And I signed a contract and went to England and worked for about 3 or 4 weeks there and produced my 4th book, Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles. And as a first-hand eyewitness to multiple mysterious lights in England in crop formations, I was very comfortable putting that title there and unfolding in the book the scientific information, the anecdotal information, and the spiritual information that every person who has ever spent time investigating crop formations, whether it is in England or the United States or Canada or other parts of Europe such as Italy, or even in the grasses in some parts of Australia where the patterns have been found. Everybody, including myself, who has been in a lot of these formations, you come away with a sense that you are in the presence of an intelligence that is quite profound, almost unknowable, and that what is happening in all of these patterns that have emerged around the world, going all the way back to the 1970s, a lot of people don't realize this, in Warminster in England, that something, not human, has interacted with the planet in the cereal crops of the world like a skin on the planet in the seasons of crops. And then add this as a very complicated facet presented to me by somebody who I think worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, who was over investigating one summer when I was there. And it actually sort of ties into the Bentwaters story as well in some strange way. We ended up in a discussion standing in a crop formation, and this man said, "It's my understanding that the CIA has been trying to use satellites to photograph every crop formation as it appears on the planet, putting it in chronological sequence with the goal of trying to discover if there is a mathematical language in these patterns." That was a turning point for me because I had not thought about the possibility of crop formations being related to something that was specifically extraterrestrial. I wasn't thinking in those terms. Craft had not been seen over patterns, really. It was just these strange, mysterious lights that were being seen by many people, videotaped by many people, small, about the size of a baseball or a softball, that are on many, many videotapes, but remain unidentified and linked to crop formations because they were in or before crop formations. So now this man is saying that the CIA is interested in looking at crop formations as mathematical language. And I said, why? To what end? And then this was the kicker. He said, well, they are becoming convinced that we are dealing with time travelers, and the crop formations are being used to monitor how accurate the time travelers are selecting their point of entry in this timeline.
Interesting. That is really a fascinating new spin on crop circles. One more thing I wanted to ask you about is you worked for a while on the disclosure hearing, which was on May 25th, 1980, and it seems like we brought together a lot of people, including yourself, in an open forum to discuss the topics of suppression of information and Freedom of Information Acts, and how we can come together to share all of this knowledge and learn more and understand more about who these other species, if they are there, who they are, and what they're trying to communicate with us. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that process that's going on of revealing more information and how we might see that unfolding?
The date was, or dates were April 30th to May 3rd, 2013, so 2 years ago. And I and about 29 other people who had been involved either with investigations of or had experience in terms of being military people or so forth. There were about 30 of us who were asked to be on panels at the National Press Club in what was called the Citizen Hearing. And this was organized by Stephen Bassett with the great support of Reuben Langdon and Jeremy, who was a cameraman, and many other people who had volunteered to try to make this effort focus into the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., with the idea of having it be formatted like a congressional hearing. And so, like, for example, I was on 4 or 5 of these panels presenting different facets of different investigations as an investigative reporter, and I might be talking about animal mutilations or human abductions or government knowledge and cover-up or RAF Bentwaters and so forth. There were these various facets. And sitting on a panel or sitting on a dais in front of us were retired congressional House of Representatives people, and Senator Gravel of Alaska retired, and they had been given honorarium fees to be there as retired congressional people to hear what the presentations and videos and evidence and photographs that we in the group of 30 would have to present, all under the umbrella of we are not alone in this universe. There is all kind of evidence that non-human intelligences are interacting with this planet, have been for a very long time, past, present, and probably future, and that the fact that the government of the United States since World War II has had a policy of denial, beginning probably between Truman and Churchill and then General Eisenhower in World War II, to protect the planet while they bought time trying to figure out what it was and what it wanted and why it was here and how long and what the implications were. And here we are now at the time of the citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, May of 2013. That was about 60 years after, 58 years after World War II, and the policy of denial was still in effect. And how could this reasonably be, and what would it take to break these policies of denial and get the facts and the truth presented to the world public as reality, and that is why we were there. And the word disclosure, I think, in the RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge phenomenon, and John Burroughs, I know, has said this before, that the Project Condign work, the investigation into the types of radiation coming from unidentified aerial phenomena being very quietly unclassified in 2006, finally reaching some of us around 2 or 3 years ago, and are realizing that it is all about unidentified aerial phenomena, technology, movements, emissions and radiations and all of this. That is a de facto confirmation of the reality of unidentified aerial phenomena that is defined by these government investigations as not being terrestrial. Therefore, de facto confirmation trumps the word disclosure. It has been disclosed for dozens and dozens of years. My documentary, A Strange Harvest, is a confirmation of some sort of non-human intelligence that is involved with the animal mutilations around the planet that has been going on probably for centuries. And so going way beyond that word, disclosure, even though we all would like the entire planet to have every government stand up and have the press conference of all centuries and just reconfirm, verify that now we are on a planet where every human being can openly discuss other life in the universe, what the relationship is between this planet and other planets, why there would be harvests of genetic material, soil, or anything else from this planet by other intelligences, and in the future, what will the relationship be between humanity evolving into an uncertain future and other civilizations in the universe that may also have uncertain futures, and that there may be tremendous value in getting past this point where we all need to be able to talk about everything that is possibly knowable concerning other life in the universe and perhaps some sort of formal communication, because our eventual future survival as a species on this planet, in this solar system, may be dependent upon communication with something that knows more about the cycles, the energies, and the dangers of living in this cosmos. And this is ultimately was and is the goal of the citizen hearing of 2013, and that if we keep moving into the 21st century, I think that every single one of us that was there in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club that first week in May of 2013, we would all agree we cannot even contemplate the possibility that this planet, 7.2 billion Homo sapiens sapien and counting, would get through the 21st century without the truth coming out globally. We're not alone in this universe. We never have been. There's been manipulation of this planet, past, present, and hopefully not future, and that it is time for every human to have the same knowledge that their alleged leaders have had since World War II.
One of the things you did mention to me earlier was that there is a lot of speculation that perhaps the planet has been manipulated possibly for millions of years, even prior to the time of the dinosaurs. Can you mention what that conversation was that you had and why the person believed it was true?
The person, this is the nature of so many of these frustrating conversations. The quote was, "Our government has proof that competing geopolitical, territorial, extraterrestrial biological entities have been interacting with this planet for at least 270 million years. I, as a reporter, say, what proof could any government on this planet have from something that was advanced intelligence and extraterrestrial, because we would have absolutely no way as humans of doing any kind of a reality check on such a statement. And I will never forget that man just looking at me and say, Linda, I can just tell you we have absolute proof. And I am saying that to you to show you how big and complex this subject is, and the powers that be do not think that humans can handle the truth without civilizations collapsing. My argument is, even though they won't fill in these gaps, which is what you're asking, I would like to have these gaps filled in too. But
Who are the powers to be?
Sorry?
Hi, Linda. This is Mike Hathaway along with Debbie. Who are the powers to be that know?
I'm sorry. The voice that's come on, it's going in and out.
Who are the powers that are blocking us?
The powers that be would be those in control of military operations in World War II and extending into the future because of the presence of extraterrestrial biological entities and advanced technologies.
Do you have is there any specific group that could be pointed to?
I'm sorry, who is this talking to me?
I apologize. I'm Debbie's co-host, Michael Hathaway. So.
Okay, Michael Hathaway. I would imagine that you all have seen the many books and television shows and radio programs that have been done for the last 30 years on the Majestic 12, MJ12, Majority 12. It's had various names. Stanton Friedman was one of the first with Bob Wood to do investigations of the list in the what is called the Eisenhower document dated in 1952. It is a briefing that allegedly was given Dwight Eisenhower having to do with the collection of information during and after World War II into a briefing paper. It is published in my book, An Alien Harvest, and it's been published in many books since the 1980s, having to do with what were the details that the Eisenhower presidency had about the investigations of unidentified aerial objects or craft or vehicles. You find those words put together and acronyms of UAVs, UACs, UFOBS that our government was using in the late 40s into the early 50s in documents that have been leaked, and policies of denial being defined very clearly about why this information could not be delivered to the public or the media, and that always relating to the same idea that that learning about the details of extraterrestrial biological entities interacting with this planet would basically cause public panic, would cause the stock market to fall, would cause civilizations to collapse. There's not any colleague that I know today or even then who agreed with that melodramatic conclusion that telling the truth about other life in the universe would have such an effect on humanity living on Earth. And as we speak today, one of the reasons for conferences like Eureka Springs, going back to 1989 when Lou Farish wanted to bring investigators together, was the frustration that there was no communication to the public and the media about what was really happening, what was really being reported, what law enforcement was really dealing with on the planet because of these imposed policies of denial and silence in generally the large military industrial complex and in intel agencies, and that we are living we're living two realities. One is what the public and the media have been allowed to have access to, which has been zero pretty much, except for the kind of work that I and a few others have tried to do with first-hand eyewitnesses and whistleblowers. And the other reality is this gigantic iceberg that is underneath the surface of life on this planet, that our government, the UK government, allies from World War II, and I'm assuming China, Russia, and everywhere else, that there are government operations that have a great deal of knowledge. They may not have answers about precisely who, what, and why, but they have a tremendous amount of information about the presence of something else that has been interacting with this planet for a very long time.
That's amazing. Linda, that is truly amazing, this amount of work that's gone into getting us to the point that we're at today. I just have one last question. Do you see a possibility that we could be a united species on this planet Earth and good stewards of the planet as we emerge into the cosmos and become part of an active universe of life? I mean, are we going to be able to sustain some sort of peace as we become cosmic citizens?
We have to get past ISIS first. And the geopolitical struggles on Earth now among humans are, I think, probably the greatest danger humans face. If we could get past ourselves and violence and territorial, what Stanton Friedman calls tribal warfare of humans, then maybe we would make more progress toward being able to make some kind of a substantive connection with the intelligence or intelligences interacting with this planet, who at this point may have on their own decided that that humanity is so self-destructive that in the end, if humanity ends up destroying itself, then the planet will be here, and other intelligences would use it. In the meantime, I think we, humans, we are the biggest block to ourselves of getting past this point of policies of denial.
Yeah. Well, that's well said, and I'm sorry we don't have more time to spend with you today. You're, like I said, you have been a true pioneer, an amazing body of work today on bringing forth, courageously information that, like you say, sometimes it's hard to share, but truth that we need to all start to learn and understand and appreciate as we emerge into a new reality, I think, of who we are as humans and where we belong in this cosmos. So thank you for all the work you've been doing. I truly love the show Ancient Aliens. It's one of my favorites, and all of the work that goes into that to bring all those guests to us, on our televisions and things that many of us will never see in real life, but can hear about through you and the work that all of you have done. So,
well, thank you very much, and I hope to see some of your audience at the Eureka Springs conference in Eureka Springs, April 10th through 12th. That's one of the places, one of the crossroads where some of us are trying to share some facts with people who really understand that we're not being told the truth in so many directions now, and that there really is some real importance to learning about what else might be going on that's not on the 6 o'clock news.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Linda Moulton Howe, and good luck at the conference. We can't wait to follow all of the rest of the work that you're putting out on and all this new information on Earth Files, where a lot of it is being presented and through documentaries and so on. So the books are available on the site, and again, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael? Hello, Michael.
Yes, I'm on.
Yeah, you know what? I'm having a problem here because there is no promotion on the show coming through. That it's kind of.
Are we on? Are we on?
I don't know. It's bugging me because the I've got the studio on, but I'm just wondering if there's some problem with the studio. So you know what? I'm gonna just to see if I can figure this out before we go on with another guest. I'm gonna go. Let's disconnect, and I'm gonna go to the studio and see if I can hear the audio and see if there's something going on. So I'll call you right back.
Yeah, stand by.
Okay. Hey, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. I'm just going to bring on our next guest, and she's also going to be at the UFO conference coming up in Eureka Springs. She's going to be presenting some information about a skull that was given to her that goes back to antiquity and points to a new species of humanoid that could have been part of what this skull passes on, this information that is passed on to her. And she is a nurse, a neonatal nurse in Texas. Melanie Young is her name, with the Star Child Project. And like I said, this skull is dating back 900 years, was given to her in 1998, and reveals some information about possible humanoid bones and things that could help us with our medicine and science. Hello, Melanie.
Hello, Debbie.
Well, wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Lost Knowledge. I'm Debbie West, and my co-host is Michael Hathaway.
Hi, Melanie.
Young.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks.
So, Melanie, we're talking today about the UFO conference that you are going to be presenting at for April 10th in Eureka Springs, and it's being produced by Ozark Mountain Publishing and with Julia Cannon and people there. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what the presentation is that you will be giving at that conference, and a little bit more about the project that you have been working on for a while there with the Star Child skull. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, the Star Child skull came to me somewhere in 1998. A friend of mine knew the person that had originally founded it in Mexico. And they gave it to me, and I said, what do you think of this? And I looked at it, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this skull ever. And they gave me two skulls, the companion skull, which looked and is totally normal, human, DNA, female. They're both over 900 years old. And when I looked at it, the Star Child, it was just so strange that I knew that I had something unusual. I had no clue what to do with it, but I thought I'd keep it anyway and try to figure out what it was. Have I lost you?
I know. So can you tell us what happened then? I mean, how did you start working with the skull, and what did you determine, as far as its age? I think you had some tests done to try to find out more about it.
Yeah, we've had lots of testing done. The first thing I did was I took it to a friend of mine who is a medical physician, and her main work was dealing with the skulls and treating people using hands-on treatment with the skull. She's an osteopathic physician. And she looked at it and says, nothing I've ever felt before or seen before. So we took it to the MUFON group here in El Paso, and I said, okay, what is this? And, of course, they all went crazy and said, oh, it's got to be an alien of some sort. And the original thought was it was possibly a hybrid or just some deformity. Nobody really knew, and nobody knew what to do with it. Well, it just so happened that Lloyd Pye was coming through town to do a lecture on his new book, at the time, Everything You Know Is Wrong, and his research with hominoids and, human evolution, if you will. So they said, well, let's take it, let him see it. And so we saw him. This was a Thursday night conference. 300 people showed up, but we met him about an hour before his lecture. And I had a cardboard box underneath my arm and walked into the Holiday Inn and said, what do you think? And once he lifted his jaw off the floor, he said, oh my gosh, this is not something that I've ever even considered looking into, but I know what I would do. And he explained what he had thought he would do if he ever found a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And his line of attack on that was exactly what I thought needed to do. So I just, felt at the time that he was the right man for the job. So I said, here, take it, run with it, do what you can do. He just so happened to be going to the International UFO Conference in Laughlin that very next day. We took it up there, introduced it to everybody, found somebody at the conference who had connections at UNLV and did some x-rays, MRIs, CT scans, and we found out then that the bone is probably about half as thick as normal human bone. It has no frontal sinuses. And that was something that the doctors who were standing around looking at this thing said, well, that's definitely abnormal and is not, has never been seen before. And so right then we thought, oh, well, we've got slam dunk proof, alien, no big deal. And then we started looking into it and found out that there are some people born without sinus cavities. So we're like, okay, 1% of the population born without sinus cavities. And so we can't really say, okay, this is a slam dunk. It's definitely alien. We're like, okay, backstep a little bit. But at that point, we decided, well, that was back in the 90s, and there was a lot of conspiracy going around. So we went ahead and took it public at that point. So we had about 1,000 people there that, okay, now know that Lloyd has it. It is out there, and they can't shut us up, basically. And we just have been going ever since then. There's about 25 differences in the Star Child skull than a normal human skull.
Melanie, can I back you up just a bit? I mean, can you hear me okay? Can I back you up just a bit? I'm just wondering how it is that someone would get a gift as a skull. In other words, was there something before that brought that to you that you were involved in?
Well, I was involved with the MUFON community and just starting to explore aliens. I mean, I've always been around them or known about them, and I just kind of got involved. And I was a massage therapist at the time, and I had just left working at the hospitals with the neonatal newborns, sick newborns at the county. And my friend who was massage therapist at the time, her husband was friends with the person that had found this, and when that person who found it, the lady who found it, she found it probably back in 1930. And when she passed away in the late 90s, my friend's husband, decided that he asked him and says, hey, you don't want those skulls? They're really cool. Can I have them? So I have weird friends. Let's just say it that way. And then he said, hey, you're the person, MUFON, aliens, you've been hanging out with all these crazy people that think they've been abducted and all of this. And he said, what do you think? And he got scared for some reason and didn't really want to have anything to do with it. He was ex-FBI, and the people that found it were the husband of the lady who found it. He was Texas Ranger. And so they were afraid of the government interfering with their livelihoods, and that's why they gave it to me, because I didn't really care.
What about the fibers in the skull?
That's really interesting. The skull is half as thick as a normal human skull, but twice as dense or denser or stronger. And then when we looked at it underneath this electron microscope, we found these really weird fibers. And if you could think about it, it's kind of like rebarb in concrete, but this is in bone. We don't have that. When we did the chemical analysis of the skull, there's more aluminum. Well, there's a high spike of aluminum in the star child. We don't have aluminum in any of our bodies. Aluminum in the human body has been connected to Alzheimer's and dementia. But this thing has a high percentage of aluminum in it. So, go ahead. It's weird.
Is it aluminum, have they associated aluminum with extraterrestrial off-world compounds?
Well, aluminum is an element that's found throughout the cosmos, if you will. So it can be found anywhere. We found it in meteorites. So yeah, it can. But we have a large amount of aluminum here on our planet too. Not in our bones, not in any mammal bones, or any animal bones on this planet. So where did it come from? How did it get embedded in there?
Was this a bone structure, the skull?
It is a complete skull.
Is it made of what we would call bones, our bones, like our bones?
It has all of the same bones that we have. You know, the frontal bone and the side bones and the occiput. It has all of those. They're just misshapen.
Interesting. Deb, are you there? She may have a question. There she is.
Yeah, I'm here, and I'm fascinated by what we can learn, you know, as far as about humanoids development. I mean, have they made any sort of a distinction between this star child skull and some of the newer children that are being born now? Because I've interviewed PMH Atwater and Meg Blackbird-Lucy and Mary Roswell, and they all talk about a sort of a new species of human that's being born here called the fifth root race that have more telepathic skills or highly sensitive and maybe even on a different frequency. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion or connection between the evolution of this star child on our planet with this skull that you've been given.
None that I'm aware of. Now, something really interesting, the last time we had the star child out in public for the general population to look at it was at the 60th anniversary of Roswell. And we had about 5 or 6 people in my little group. And there was somebody doing aura pictures. And they did aura pictures with us. And I will take these pictures. Nobody's seen these since then to Eureka Springs. But the aura pictures were interesting. We would take them, with us without the skull. And those, you would see really pretty blues and greens and, purples and all the real pretty colors. And then we would bring in the star child into our field. And then you would see this almost like a dump of yellow, of knowledge. And you can feel it. It's like there's this really a lot of knowledge. And 2 people that held it were psychics. And they both like almost crumbled and cried because they saw how it died. So it was real interesting to see that. But that'll be fun to pull out for everybody.
Have you ever had anyone do a forensic mock-up of what it would look like in physical form?
We've had numerous artist renditions. We've done the clay and stuff. Understand that when you're doing something like that, with something this strange, it's still got to be filtered through the human eye. So it's still going to look like they have to make it into their parameters where, so the pictures we have and the stuff that we have is on our website, thestarchildproject.com. And you can see all of those renditions. They look a little alien, a little human-like with big eyes. And when we did the clay rendition, I can't remember the gentleman's name who did it. And actually, I don't think I'm allowed to use it. But he was a forensic facial reconstruction. And when we asked him, well, how did you put the eyeballs in? Literally, he said, well, I just cut one in half because it won't fit in the eye socket. The eye socket of the star child is about 1/7 of an inch. The eye socket of a normal human eye socket is 2 inches deep. So there's a big difference in the eyes that, because of the way the eyes are situated, you've got the foramen, the hole that the eye nerves go through. In a normal skull, in humans, is straight in the center of the back. Well, in the star child, it's more forward and closer to the nose. So it's telling me that this thing has to see differently. It looks like it's going to, because there's no eyelids either. There's no place for an eyelid. So it kind of tells me that the eyes are a little, I don't know if they're going to be almond-shaped, but the way the skull looks and the way the eyes are situated on the face, it looks like it's going to be the almond-shaped eyes that you see in normal grays or in a human hybrid. Now, we do know for a fact this is not human. It has no DNA that connects to humans. So it is not human.
Is it, and you have actually dated it back to 900 years or so?
Yes, it died about 950 years ago. Both skulls died about the same time. I understand the star child was buried in a shallow grave inside of a cave. The normal skull, the normal skeleton, because the skeletons were found at the same time. This young girl went into a cave in Mexico, and sitting on top of the ground was a normal human skeleton. Coming out of the ground in a small grave-like thing, coming out of that ground was a deformed hand holding this normal human's hand. And so she dug it up, and she said that every bone was deformed in that skeleton.
Where's the rest of the skeleton now, do you know?
The story goes that, of course, she was told not to go exploring the caves. So, of course, teenage girl, she does. So she collects all these bones and takes them back to the house in a basket. But she's not supposed to have them, so, of course, she's going to hide them. Well, in this area of the country, it's a desert. You get a little trickle of rain, you get a flood. And so the next morning she got up, it had flooded that night, and she had lost all of the bones. And she went looking, as all she could recover were the skulls. The two skulls. So that's all we have.
Interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
So Melanie, why do you think that you're the caretaker of the skull? Do you have any ideas, like why it would be your project here on Earth to sort of manage and oversee this skull?
I feel gifted. I feel that the powers that be, actually, if you, I've had readings, if you will, where I've been told that the aliens, the powers that be, the higher beings, have gifted it to me because they know my heart is pure, and that I'm the one that can protect it and get the answers that need to be done in an ethical, kind way. That's what I understand, and that's what I feel, and that's the way it is.
Are you able to make telepathic contact with any of these beings and get more information?
I used to, and to really be honest with you, when we started all of this process, before we had any DNA, Lloyd, my lead researcher, passed away last year. And he was so strong against, if you will, playing the game the way the mainstream plays it. He really asked me not to go that route because we didn't want anybody in mainstream to be able to say, oh, you're just manipulating the evidence, or you're just, we want mainstream to take us seriously. And mainstream doesn't take us in this field in ufology seriously. So he kind of steered me away from all of that, but yes, I have been able to, and I'm just trying to get back into it again.
Good afternoon. This is Lost Knowledge. This is Debbie West and Michael Hathaway, and today we are talking, we've been speaking with a couple of people who will be presenting at the Eureka Springs UFO Conference. It's their 28th straight annual event. The conference this year marks their 28th year. It's produced by Ozark Mountain Publishing, which is the Dolores Cannon's publishing arm that is being carried on through the work of her daughter Julia Cannon. And for more information about the Ozark Mountain UFO Congress, you can go to the Ozark Mountain Publishing website. They have a lot of speakers coming there, including keynote speaker Richard. There's many speakers. I can't remember all the names actually, but Linda Moulton Howe will be there, and Thomas Reed and Melanie Young, who we're talking to today from the Star Child Project. So, Melanie, just before break, you were talking to us a little bit about your contact with off-world entities and extraterrestrials. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I think a lot of us are starting to open up to this, you know, the possibility of life outside the universe, and even contacting them and learning and understanding more about advanced science, mathematics, medicine, energy, and so on from, you know, contact with some of these high intelligence life forms. I was wondering if you could share with us any of that kind of contact that you might have had.
Well, when I first became involved with the Star Child, when the Star Child came to me, I did a lot of soul searching, speaking with a lot of psychics and healers and stuff. And basically, it was just relayed to me through them and through my own meditative states and stuff that this skull has the opportunity to change this world and to change the way we think about things. So it's just too important to not continue the work that we've been doing all these years. And there are so many different entities that I've been involved with over the years. I couldn't even begin to tell you all of them.
How do you get involved? How do they come to you?
It started out as through just meditation, opening up my mind, asking questions, finding psychics, and learning from them on how to open up and actually hear the messages.
What was the first experience that really started you on this journey?
The first experience that started me, goes all the way back to my childhood. I've been involved with ETs, UFOs. I grew up right outside of Marfa, Texas, which is where the Marfa lights are, unidentified orbs of light in the sky. I grew up right there, going out there and watching them all the time, every day or every night. So it's never been a stretch for me to believe in other of extraterrestrial lives. I'm not naive enough to think that we're it.
Can you remember your first experience?
This is way off subject now, but which lifetime do you want to hear about?
Well, now that's so you're connecting your star being, yourself and your soul to the skull, right?
Yes, sir.
Boy, that'd be interesting if you were the skull back then, wouldn't it? Or do you think you are?
No, I don't. No, I know I'm not. But I do feel in my heart of hearts that I chose to come back to Earth for this purpose.
Okay. Well, I can believe that.
Yeah.
So when did you choose that?
Well, do you really want a date on this?
Right down to the minute.
It was...
No, I'm kidding.
Okay, if you were in Eureka Springs back in 1998, you would have heard my story then, prior to the skull coming into my life. So this is not the first time I've spoken at Eureka Springs. 1998 is when I started understanding and talking about my personal experiences and my abduction experiences.
That's how about your family? Have they had a history of that too?
Very much so, yes.
So it does run in the family, a lot like Thomas Reed's family.
Yeah. Yeah, it runs in my family. My mother, definitely. My grandfather, I'm sitting here looking at one of his paintings of a UFO that he will, until the day he died, denied it was a UFO. But you look at the painting, it's very clearly a UFO. So, yeah, it goes back a long way in my family.
Yeah, and we find this very fascinating, Melanie. I mean, we've talked to so many people and Michael talks to people all the time, and I have a friend visiting me right now that went to Dolores Cannon's quantum hypnosis school, and she does that work, follows in her footsteps and does that work here in Austin, Texas, and Houston, Texas, and had an office at the ARE Center, the Edgar Cayce Center here in Houston. So it doesn't surprise us to hear about, generational contact with these other beings, past lives, memories of, who we are off planet and our, what we call Earth assignment.
Yeah.
While we're here on Earth at this present time, why we're here, what we're doing, and the motives behind, our soul incarnation's agreement to be here.
Yeah.
Soul contracts are important, and, it's important for us, I think, as a society and a species to all sort of wake up to the revelation that those things are more real than what we used to think was the only reality,
Yeah.
What we consider a normal life. Those experiences you're talking about are more real, and the true understanding of that is starting to emerge, and you're part of that. You're part of launching us out into the awareness, that these realities are significant.
They are, and the mainstream scientists will totally, Now, our geneticist who is working with us on our DNA, I tell you, he is an old soul. He knows all this stuff, but can he come out? Can I give you his name? No. Because if I do, he'll lose his livelihood.
No, I totally understand. Yeah, and I've talked to doctors. I mean, I don't blame them for leading sort of
double life
right now. You have to in this day and age. You have to be smart. I mean, you don't want to put a target on your back, and you don't want, some of these things are too important. Like you say, the skull is too important for humanity to, just to bring the wrong energy around it. But I think Dolores Cannon had a good way of spoon-feeding people what she called a spoonful of sugar, which was enough information for them to just question, their own understanding.
Yeah.
And you don't have to believe everything that you hear or everybody's story, but you do have to, I think, at some point acknowledge your own story.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so true.
And embrace it and honor it, right? And and really connect with it, because that's what being human is about.
I think so. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't talk much about my own story either, and, it's personal. It's a personal piece of our own puzzle, of our own piece of our own existence. And but I think that we all, as we start to explore this in more of an open forum, we'll all start to understand a little bit more about each other and our interconnectedness, to not just ourselves, but to all these other souls, whether they're incarnated right now or not, and, other life forms, whether they're in our past or our future. There's a big connection there that I think we're all searching for.
Definitely. And I think the more we all talk about our truths, our personal truths, without judgment, the more we learn.
I've had a metaphysical discussion group for 20 years that meets once a week, and I'm amazed. And the people will share. I mean, because we accept it. And
yeah.
The stories I hear are mind-boggling.
Yeah, well, my mom has had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. I grew up in the New Age movement, which I totally think is just a euphemism because it's an old age movement, the more you think about it. Us New Agers have been around a lot longer than these mainstreamists. So it's just phenomenal to see where, how far we've come in the last 15, 20 years.
Let me ask you something, because this comes up a lot, and it's sort of I think it's the big elephant in the room. Are these alien beings, do they wish us any harm? Are they dangerous?
There's so many different entities, if you will, and so many different factions that I'm aware of, that I've become aware of. Some are. But we are a planet of free will, and we can tell them to go away. And I have. And they don't bother me anymore.
Amen to that, right? We control what we engage in, and our intention determines which frequency we decide to participate in.
Well, you also have to understand that it's my understanding that there is, Star Trek isn't too far off. There is a Federation out there that protects our planet.
Mm-hmm.
And protects those of us, the star children of this planet, the new kids, the new people, those of us with higher vibrational fields, those of us who have a purpose higher than ourselves, but it protects us from harm, from outside, So I think that, not every human is a good person. Trying to label all of them as good or bad, you can't. It's like labeling us as good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Each one, they're individuals, and they all have their own little cliques, if you will, and some are just thugs, and some are really nice guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard the same story, and about the Galactic Federation, the hierarchy of intelligent diplomacy, I guess, if you want to call it that oversees and governs, the universe, and of which we are very much benefiting from in so many ways that we don't, I don't think we understand. But a protection, a kind of a guidance and a protection that we can learn to appreciate, I think, as we grow up cosmically a little bit into cosmic citizens, that this loving entity that comprises many civilizations has just been, calling out to us to wake up and grow up and evolve, right?
Basically grow up,
I don't know about you, but I feel like in this, even just, 4 or 5 years, even just since 2012, a shift of reality has occurred that's of a magnitude that I could have never imagined.
I think that's true. I think we're shifting. I think we're almost there. We're getting closer.
What do you see at your conferences? Do you see a different type of person coming now, or the same as, say, a few years ago?
I haven't been out on the lecture field. We let Lloyd just take over for a while because we had a life and we had, realities to deal with. But I've just been out lecturing. I've done probably about maybe 10 lectures in the last year. But I'm seeing a lot of the same people I used to see when I was out hanging out with the guys and on the circuit, where we're kind of losing some following, I think. The Laughlin conferences, the international UFO conferences, we just need some fresh blood. And so I'm hoping we'll get some fresh people who are, interested in doing more research.
Well, and I think too, Melanie, that so many people have paved the way for us to be where we're at now. But I think a lot of us, especially those that are entering the game, are hoping for, like you say, scientific revelations and people that really take this information and make it, instead of ridiculing it, make it part of our evidence about discovery of new knowledge. And I see that happening, and I'm glad that you have kind of kept your information protected, and when the time comes, I'm sure that the right energy and the right people will be guided to help with the project. You have to believe that there's another hand helping, from afar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I totally believe that everything happens at the right time, in the right place, in the right way. And that's where we're at right now. Science has brought us as far as it can. We've had basically we know right now that the DNA of the star child is not human. We have the DNA. We're not even going to have to ever cut on this skull anymore. We have it. But we just need enough money to get the lab. The lab says they'll do it if we get the money, and we just need the money to do it. Up until 2003, we didn't have, the human genome wasn't even completed until 2003.
Mm-hmm. You're right, so it's all a matter of timing.
Yeah. We've just been waiting for science to catch up with us.
So what's the cost of producing that knowledge?
When we started, we were looking at $7 million.
Wow.
Okay? It's come down a lot. Now we only need somebody who will sign up for a 3-year stint with $250,000 per year. If after the first year what we're finding is no big deal, it's human, then we're done. But if we find that it's really, really unusual and we need to continue, then we need somebody to step up to the plate for that 3-year contract. Within 3 years, we'll have an answer.
And that's the study of the skull?
That would be the origin of the skull.
Excuse me, Deb.
No, I mean, that seems so doable, doesn't it? I mean, in retrospect, I mean, it really does seem like it could be entirely possible that we could get that information and then build upon it, Yeah,
and once we get the money, and right now, literally, it comes right down to, I need the money. The project needs the money. And we have a lab, we have the geneticist, all we need is enough money to do the double-blind studies. Mm-hmm. The DNA that we've done, we've already sent into the national database. It comes back non-specific, not found on this earth.
Wow.
Period.
What are the skeptics? I mean, what's the skeptics' big argument? Let's put it that way.
The big argument is you don't have it, it's not reproducible, you haven't got the complete genome, you can't reproduce it, you can't double-blind study it. And that to me is a big duh. We need the money. Once we get that, then we can peer review it. That's what it comes right down to. We've got to do the scientific process.
Sounds like some television network ought to pick up a documentary on it.
Documentaries, those are so fun to work with. We've been on numerous documentaries. Then it comes down to they won't do it until they know for a fact they've got something worth doing it. And that comes down to the money. They want the answer before anybody's going to do a documentary.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, we really need to get something into the scientific community, not a reality TV series. I mean, I firmly believe that that's where this is all headed. That we're dealing with science that we can now truly evaluate and understand, and in a real way, we can make science fiction into science fact, and that is been the stumbling block in the past, is that we couldn't. Now we can measure things, we can analyze things, we can, on the nanoscale, we can identify things down to the, submolecular level.
Right.
And DNA strands that we could have never identified before. One of my questions is, how do you see the information coming from the skull and from the composition of the skull? Is there anything that we can learn that could help us in the medical field? Because I know you're a neonatal, nurse by trade. Do you see things that might help, us to heal bone? I mean, can we use this information in any way to add to our ability to provide health care to the people?
This is exactly why I have the skull. This is why I think it was given to me, why I think the universe has given it to me, because that's my goal. It's never been about proving that there's aliens out there. I don't really, to me it's a fact. We're not the only ones out there.
Yeah.
To me, it's about, this is so strange, so weird. It lived long enough to have grown teeth, to have the bones are secure. This thing lived long enough on this planet. So let's take the deformities that it has. It shouldn't be alive if it was human. Everything that's different about it that lived on this planet, hearing, eyesight, bones, speech, vocalization, collagen. There's so much collagen in this bone, it's crazy. Osteoporosis, brittle bones. I mean, so many things. It's endless possibilities what this can teach us, what we can use it for. It's not just about proving another life form, and for me, it's about taking that information and then doing the bio-research to help mankind. And I think that's why it's been given to me.
Were the teeth like human teeth?
The teeth are like human. They're the same composition, but get this, there are 3 rows of them.
3.
3 rows. And the teeth that are apparent, that are down, that are in place, ate the same food that the skull that was found with it. It is worn down. It had 3 rows of mature teeth.
What was the size that do you estimate?
They're normal size for that size of the skull.
Which would be approximately?
Approximately the size of a 12-year-old.
You know what's funny, Melanie, is that we have been also finding a lot of information about the giant skulls and the existence of very large humans from antiquity that were between 12 and even 15 feet tall. And they've been, uncovering these at the same time and saying, well, maybe we have everything wrong about, who's been on the planet in terms of, our own species, if you would call it that,
I totally agree. We got it wrong. It's just so wrong, it's crazy. We've got it wrong. We don't know where all the elongated skulls come from. Our geneticist is working on that also.
Is he here in Texas by any chance, or?
No, he's not.
No, okay. Yeah, well, and I hate to say this, but I think that there are species that are master geneticists that could help us with all of this, that may not be terrestrial, may not be here necessarily the way we would picture, each other. But I would welcome all of that assistance, certainly, in the scientific and medical community to help us, It
would be great.
If we could humble ourselves to do that, I think it could help a lot of people. I know that Tesla, for instance, one of the great scientists of our time, willingly worked with, any. Good afternoon. This is Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge Revolution Radio Studio A. We are going to talk now to the author of Indie Spiritualist, Chris Grosso. Michael, I think you've done some background work on Chris. Did you want to share some of that?
I would love to. I've got a pretty good long introduction here. Chris is a public speaker, writer, recovering addict, spiritual director, and author of Indie Spiritualist, The No Bullshit Exploration of Spirituality, and Everything Mind, What I've Learned About Hard Knocks, Spiritual Awakening, and the Mind-Blowing Truth of It All. He writes for Origin Magazine, Huffington Post, and Mantra Yoga and Health Magazine, and has spoken and performed at Wanderlust Festival, Yoga Journal Conference, Sedona World Wisdom Days, Kripalu, and more. A self-taught musician, Chris has been writing, recording, and touring since the mid-90s. He is passionate about his work with people who are in the process of healing or struggling with addictions of all kinds. He speaks and leads groups in detox, yoga studios, rehabs, youth centers, 12-step meetings, hospitals, conferences, and festivals worldwide. He is a member of the advisory board for Drugs Over Dinner. Chris is well known for his book, The Indie Spiritualist, and he has a wide audience that have endorsed it, including Tony Hawk, the world-renowned skateboarder, Ron Carson, Bernie Siegel, to name a few. Chris also writes for several popular blogs, including Rebel Society, Huffington Post, and is a touring musician. Chris is director of the Interfaith Center, the Sanctuary Old Shepherd's Fields, and does a radio show called Where is My Guru? Well, Chris, I'm out of breath, and I'm amazed, and it would be quite a job to keep up with you in all of this. Can you talk about your years of heavy addiction and how it led you on your spiritual path, and how you found your higher power, and what does it mean to you?
Well, sure. Hi, Michael. Hi, Debbie. How are you guys?
That is great. You can come jam with us on a Monday night sometime.
Right on. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Let's see. I guess how do I sum this up? I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol a bit later than most of the people I went to school with. I was in probably about 11th grade, whereas most people I knew kind of started when they were freshmen or before that. But I quickly made up for lost time, and what started out as just, the occasional joint and beer quickly turned into hallucinogenics and heavier drugs, amphetamines, pretty much anything that was available. And very quickly I spiraled out of control until about the age of 19. I really crossed that line of experimentation and abuse to full-on addiction. And that carried on for some years, and it was just an awful downward spiral. And it was at 24 that I ended up in my first detox unit, which was really actually a wonderful experience for me, because it was the first time in many years I went more than a day or so without putting some kind of a substance into my body. And it gave me an opportunity to really take a look at my life, not just the week or so I spent in detox, but from there I went into a 28-day inpatient rehab program, and then into a 2-month halfway house. So I really took time and just realized what a train wreck my life had become. I also got myself back into college and was going to school for substance abuse counseling. And it was there that I met my advisor, who was also a professor of mine, a very wonderful woman who actually sparked my interest in spirituality, which I had had none of up to that point in my life. So really it started there, and she gave me a book to read, and then I started reading everything I could get my hands on, from Ram Dass to Thich Nhat Hanh. I mean, Buddhism, Hinduism, mystic Christianity, Sufism, whatever. I just was consuming it, and that was my introduction. Unfortunately, I ended up relapsing about a year into my sobriety after that, And that really became a pretty vicious cycle for me over the course of, I don't know, give or take the next 10 years, where I would get clean for roughly a year or so, and then inevitably end up relapsing. And my problem there was that I was basing my sense of recovery and well-being on the external. I'd get the job back, girlfriend, apartment, money, and so forth, but I wasn't doing a lot of the internal work. I was still, each time I would go deeper into my spiritual practice, and I was doing meditation, mantra prayer, things like that. But I still had a significant amount of armor, guarding my heart, and I wasn't really willing or ready to touch those raw and vulnerable places within me. And that was pretty much until about 4 years ago, and that was my final relapse. I woke up in a jail cell after a blackout drunk, which wasn't the first time that had happened, but it was the scariest. And from there, I went into another program in a different state from where I was living at the time, and I did 2 months there, came home with absolutely nothing. I lost my job, which was the first time that had ever happened to me. I just always managed, even though I had this vicious cycle of addiction, you're protected under state laws and whatnot, and under Family Medical Act leave, so I was able to maintain jobs, but I just went over the edge this last time, and so I came home. I had to move back in with my parents. I was, early 30s at this point, and I had no job. I had to file for unemployment. It was just a really low time, but also a high time, I guess you could say, because I really began letting go of a lot of the pain, and I started getting vulnerable with myself and touching those raw places that prior to this experience I wasn't ready to. And it's because of that I've been able to start removing that heart armor, that had been built there and just continuing to grow over so many years. And yeah, so that's kind of what happened. Then I started writing for some blogs about my experience, and I started, people started reading it, and a New York Times bestselling author ended up reading some stuff, and she introduced me to her agent, and it was about a year and a half into my recovery at that point that we were signing a book deal with Atria and Simon & Schuster, and and then my first book came out, which was incredible, and I have another book coming out in October, and it's been pretty surreal, to say the least, and, to be of service, to give back, that's what I'm most passionate about. So I don't know if that was a bit long-winded, but hopefully that kind of touched on what you were interested in.
Well, to me, what I'm hearing you say, and having taught for quite a few years ago in music field, and looking at sensitive, I call it the gift and the curse. One of the senses, probably the kinesthetic sense with you, the emotional sense, is so strong and so powerful that it overrides the other. And I've found that a lot of people will search for something that will kind of dumb that down, that protection of the heart, so to speak.
Right.
It takes them away, and yet at the same time, once one learns to embrace. So my question next is, was there that tipping point where you really began to understand yourself?
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing process, that's for sure.
Well, yes, but I mean, to begin to gain confidence that you're unique.
Yeah, and I think that really was what happened about 4 years ago. I just ended up in such a place of brokenness and despair and hopelessness. It was the first time I had suffered a relapse where I had no semblance of hope. Each time in the past, I always kind of felt deep down within that, okay, even though I was in a horrible place at that time, I would bounce back. This time, however, I didn't experience that, and that was pretty scary. Like, I was literally ready to die. I had a couple of suicide attempts in my past. They were feeble, though. They were more, I think, calls for attention than anything. But this was the first time I really felt very ready to die, and that was, I think, that was the tipping point for me. That I came back from that. And again, like I said, it was just such a brokenness that it kind of shattered that heart armor and allowed me to begin to go in and do that work. And the more I go deeper into that internal work and sifting through the wreckage of my past, that is the more I get to know my true self. And with that knowledge comes not only greater self-compassion, but, you cultivate fearlessness and a bit of self-worth and self-love, things of that nature. So yeah, that was the tipping point for me, and now I just I do my best each day to work a little bit more on it, and while I'm working on myself, also doing so in a way where I can try and help others along, because that's a big part of it for me, as well as bettering myself so I can offer the world the best version of myself possible, and in that make myself available to others who are struggling, and not just with drugs and alcohol, but if you're a human, we all experience suffering and pain. So I'm grateful to be able to help others in whatever way I can.
Was there a point when everyone else began to realize or knew that you had changed?
Changed
I
now?
mean, we're now sober. In other words, that they saw a change in you reaching to that spirituality.
Yeah, when you ask me that, the first people I think of are my parents, because they witnessed it firsthand. I'm very, very blessed to, have parents that were not enablers by any means, but they were supportive, and they never turned their backs on me, and I put them through hell and back. I can't tell you how many times I've been in emergency rooms or detoxes and rehabs, and that they saw me at my lowest in these places. And each time I would come out of that, they would have the hope that maybe this time would be the time, and that seemed the case usually for a little while, and then I would end up, like I said, a year later falling off. But this time around, they've been a great mirror for me in regards to what's going on in my life, and how this time really has been different, and how I really have to work.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah,
Did they know it before you?
What's that? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Did they know it before you? Did they have a sense of your change before you knew it?
Whoa, good question.
I'm leading to a point, that's all. I'm just curious.
Sure. No, right. And that's why I'm considering it, because I something I've never thought about, to be honest with you. So I'm quickly trying to to look into the past couple of years, and in doing so, I mean, perhaps I know that I often am not always the best judge of what I'm doing as far as like where I'm at in life, and I'm still a hard critic on myself, and I'm tough. So yeah, I think there's a very good chance that they might have.
Well, if you thought of this, okay, a near-death experience, what we call them, you have 5 senses: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. When we hit a point, that rock bottom, there's a shift that goes on in what I call your mental DNA. In other words, you're shifting. It's sort of like a record that's playing, and all of a sudden somebody bumps the needle. It jumps. Now, the people listening are aware that it jumped, but the record may not be aware of it itself. So when and I see this so many times in people that have had near-death experience that all of a sudden are different, and the world is not the same anymore, and it takes a while, and you're so fortunate. I got run over, so my gift of that, my wife understood it, and I celebrate that every day. Not that I want to have it happen again,
right.
But that shift and the change, there's a richness that probably came out of you now that was not there before, and it's almost like accepting it. It shows in your music, it shows in your writing, and everything else. Does that compute at all?
Actually, completely it does. Yeah, I do feel like I grew up listening to like punk and hardcore music, which I still have an appreciation for. I mention that only to say that, I've had this kind of angsty side of me, and that's just kind of somewhat ingrained in me. But I have noticed over these past 4 years a significant shift in my demeanor, in my just my inner self, just the way I am, and yeah, that angst is significantly less. I think, meditation also plays into that, but the near-death experience, as you mentioned, that, I've never thought of it like that, but that certainly resonates as true for me, makes sense. But it's like I said, that brokenness, it was a gift in retrospect.
So I'm gonna interject here, because I love hearing all about, how you made your way into recovery, and, you've become an inspiration to others, and doing the work, paying back to the the place that helped heal you. Then I'm actually a recovering alcoholic myself, so I understand that the whole exploration of self and then the giving back, and how that community is, a very strong advocate to us doing that. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about today as well, Chris, is your book as basically like hit the street hard. The endorsements are unbelievable. Just starting with Tony Hawk and Ben, was it Siegel, Barney Siegel, and then Ram Dass, who you talked to. I'm looking through it, and some of these people that have endorsed you are, some of the biggest voices in spirituality, religion, science, bridging a lot of things, the New Age movement, and so on. How did you reach out to such a broad audience, and and sort of what do you get from all of this overwhelming appreciation for what you presented here?
That's so surreal to me. I actually picked up that book. I read it once after it was published, and I hadn't read it since. And I actually picked it up the other day, and I was kind of thumbing through it because I'm just finishing up edits for my new book, and I just kind of want to compare and contrast a little. And I did glance through those endorsements, and it just brought me right back to when I was receiving them prior to the book's publication. It's hard for me to make sense of that because these are people that have had such a significant impact in my life that I didn't just get like one or two, but I got a handful of just really mind-blowing endorsements. And I feel we're talking about, because I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, I don't take credit for it at all. The truth of the matter is, when I came home from that last rehab, like I was saying earlier, I had nothing. And the one thing I really had cultivated was a surrender. And in that surrender, what I started to do, and it's something I still do to this day without fail every morning, is I say a quick prayer before I meditate to the higher power of my understanding, and I simply ask that it help me to get out of my own way as much as possible so that I can allow for a deeper truth, a deeper wisdom, a deeper guidance to guide me through my day, and in that guidance that I'm of service to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me just ask you, so did you, in your search for your own connection to Source, did you discover that maybe what we are experiencing here on Earth, that there's a bigger story there? Than what we were told in our, maybe mainstream religious studies and history books. Is there more to this existence than what we may have thought before?
Oh, yeah. That's to me what spirituality is all about, waking up to the deeper truths of life that we've had conditioned in us. To me, spirituality is about peeling away layers, peeling away conditioning, and not just seeking, but truly beginning to experience these deeper truths. The truth of unity, the truth that we are all one, like all of the great mystic traditions at their core teach, is that it's one source, and it's an interconnected source. And it's just my experience. I'm not saying it as a definitive truth, but it's what I've come to understand and many of the great wisdom traditions teach. And it's an amazing thing. And then on another level, you look at the evolution of humanity and where that's headed. And I was interviewing Barbara Marx Hubbard, who's quite an evolutionary thinker, a few weeks ago, and we were getting into the topic of humanity and how, in the not too distant future, which could be hundreds or thousands of years, but she was saying how humanity is not going to always be humanity. You look at the evolution of life. And, a lot of humans think this is the be-all, end-all of it, but that's kind of a bit ignorant, I think, and so, yes, there is so much more going on in every facet of life that's to me, that is, again, spiritual.
Well, I've been getting a big kick out of Russell Brand and his little takes on Juice TV, if you've seen any of those. I
have not, but I do appreciate. Yeah, I haven't seen him, but seen those. But I do appreciate what he's doing. And
I see here, listed in the book, you actually have Zeitgeist, the movie, as one of the films. What the Bleep Do We Know? Those are some pretty big, The Matrix. These are some forward-thinking idealists, futurists, talking about, just like Barbara Max Hubbard, the evolution of humanity and who we may become and who maybe we were in the past. And it's all very fascinating when you look at it from your own spiritual perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is from your own, I think you nailed it, from your own spiritual perspective.
Yeah, individually as a soul.
Exactly.
Yeah, what does it mean to me, and how do
Right.
I incorporate that into my own, my own personal evolution? Because that's really what it boils down to.
Right.
We're on a personal
Yes,
journey, unified with all these other beautiful beings. So, but Michael's done so much work on bridging the gap between, our own knowing, what we call our earth assignment, and how we can connect that to the greater good.
Sure.
Have you done any past life or soul work, or have you stuck with, just your meditative practices and taking what you get from there?
Yeah, I have yet to. There's a lot of yet tos in my life. I predominantly do focus on meditation, mantra, prayer, things of that nature. But I mean, the meditations have taken me so deep, into these states of just utter oneness. Samadhi, it's called, where everything falls away, and all that's left is, what you could say is a witnessing awareness, if you will, or a sense of beingness or isness. Where it's just. It's one of those things. How do you really put it into words? But,
right.
Do you visualize that, or do you hear a sound with that, or feel it, or what?
Yeah, no. When I'm in that place, there's no visualization. There's no sound. There's just a very simple essence. It's a very faint. It's almost like when kids blow those little bubbles. It's almost like a very thin film. That you're barely conscious. And it's not even that you're conscious of yourself anymore, because that ego nature has fallen aside temporarily, and it's just I would go so far as to use the word love, but I don't even think that's quite accurate. But I think that's as close as I could come to it. It's
sort of an indescribable, unconditional love. I mean,
yes.
Just way beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
so when you go out and you work with other people that are still struggling in their addictions, it must be sad I know it is, sad to see others in the same struggle and fight for their own survival, but what kind of messages do you give them, and what kind of, truths do you tell them that can sort of help them as they try to move towards that, that connection to source?
Yeah, well, the most important thing I try to do is always be completely raw, completely real. I don't try to sugarcoat things. I also don't try to scare people. What I can do is share from my experience, and that's what I try to base things on. So I'll share a bit about what I went through, the realities of it. I've seen a lot of people lose their lives to this disease, and it's heartbreaking. It never gets easier, nor would I want it to. But it depends on who I'm talking to, because as Michael said in the intro, I will sometimes speak in youth centers, so I might curtail it a bit different to that versus if I'm out at like Sedona World Wisdom Days, which great conference I just spoke at in January, but that's a bit of a different crowd. Regardless, though, I just try to be as authentic as I can. I always emphasize, like I've already done in this program, that people need to find out for themselves what spirituality is, what their path is. I strongly encourage people to become what I call, their own spiritual scientists, really, and to explore. Give yourself, especially if you're new to the path, give yourself some time to really try out a few different things, see what does and does not resonate for you, and go from there. Don't try to imitate someone else's trip. You can't do it like that. You need to, you can take inspiration and guidance, but you have to really learn to cultivate a relationship with your heart, in a discerning manner, so you're able to really tune in there, and look to that for guidance. And that's not just like a cliche thing. Like, it's a very real, you once you're in tune with your heart, it's incredible, where it can guide you. So
do you think that I've talked to people who feel that there's a real epidemic right now of prescribed medications for youth of today that, can be very detrimental, leading them to lives of addiction. Do you think that is a problem right now?
That's a great question. I actually saw someone wearing a T-shirt a while back that said meditation over medication. And I appreciated the sentiment because I get it, but I also found myself feeling a bit concerned at the same time. I was on medication for a while. I've been off of all medication for just over 3 years now, which is great. I take a multivitamin in the morning, and that's it. But I have met many people who I do believe, at least if, for a temporary time, if you are chemically imbalanced, then, there's nothing per se wrong with Western medicine helping to realign oneself, just to get them back on track. I do agree that there is absolutely an epidemic, and it is, it has tragic consequences. So I don't want to confuse anyone with what I'm saying, that I'm pro-medication. It's that, it's a case-by-case thing. I recognize that, many doctors are in bed with these pharmaceutical companies, and that's tragic because they're unnecessarily pushing medications on people. I worked in an elementary school for about 5 years prior to doing this writing thing, where I saw so many kids on ADHD medication, having Ritalin, things like that pumped into their system. They're kids. Kids do have attention deficits. It's a natural part of being a kid. And things like that lead into teenage years and adult years. So, yeah, absolutely, there is. But again, it's case by case, and I encourage anyone, who's thinking about going on medication or who is on medication, do your research. Really do your homework. Don't just go in and take your doctor's word for it. Do your work too, and make sure that what you're doing is right for you.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel that going through, the rehab programs, that they were incorporating enough integrative medicine, in terms of like meditation, diet, things that didn't involve medication to help you in your own process of healing?
The last facility I was in, I saw that, and that was great. And this wasn't like a high, expensive, fancy facility. I never went to any of those like luxury facilities, which I'm grateful for. Like when I'm at my rock bottom, I want
like Hazelton. Is it called Hazelton in Minnesota?
Yeah. No, I never went to any of those.
It looks like a posh, like Ritz-Carlton. Yeah.
Right. And hey, man, to each their own. But for me, like, the detoxes I were in, they smelled. They were basement-y, and I'm glad for that because that was just the experience. I didn't need a cushy experience at that time, and that works for others, and that's fine. But for me, I needed it raw, and that's what I got. So the rehabs I'd been in up to that point, no, there was no integrative or integral approach. But I am seeing more of that today. Unfortunately, the majority of it is in these kind of, pricier private facilities. So it's, I'm not seeing it as a statewide or a state-run, state-grant sort of thing. Though there is a wonderful group in Connecticut, back where I'm from, that I'm involved with called Toivo, and they are run by state grants, and they're not a recovery facility, but they are in Hartford, Connecticut, and what they essentially do is they're able to offer for people in the community, a lot of them are in recovery or have PTSD, whatever the case may be, they are able to offer all these free courses in yoga and meditation and sound healing and all these incredible things. So it's kind of an extension in a way of once they get out of treatment, or some treatment facilities will bring people there. So it would be great to see more of that worldwide. But speaking in the U.S., funding is constantly being cut for these kind of programs. And what baffles the mind is that you're cutting funding, yet the greatest majority of people that are imprisoned it's because of drugs and alcohol. And then you start to look at the costs of what it takes to keep them imprisoned. And it doesn't make any sense until you start thinking about, that there's people that are making money from that. And it's just very, very sad, things like that. And going back to the pharmaceutical companies and doctors, it kills me that at the end of the day, so much of this is big business, and people aren't really taking human lives into consideration. It's all about the mighty dollar, and that's sickening and heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to your speeches for a minute, do you ever feel when you're in that zone speaking that there's something speaking through you?
Yeah, that happens a lot. Not all the time, but yes. Before I do an interview, before I speak, it's the same thing as basically when I get up in the morning. I take a minute, I close my eyes, take a few conscious breaths, like I did before we got on this call, and I just ask, again, the higher power of my understanding to please, help me say or share whatever is going to be of greatest benefit to, in this case, listeners, or if I'm speaking at a conference to the people in the audience or whatever. And usually, the first minute or two, I'm kind of, not nervous per se, but, kind of, in my head thinking, okay, am I sounding all right? Is this going over well? And then if I'm at a conference, I'll look at people's faces and try to read, their reaction. But I find usually after a few minutes that it just flows, which I'm grateful for. But now that you ask, now I'm back in that conscious spot of, oh,
you know what, I want to ask you a little bit about religion because, a lot of the 12-step programs talk about, connection to your own, divine source or your religion, and like you said, it's an individual experience. But what is your personal views on, sort of religion, and how do you see that fit into our lives and helping us to become more, more in tune with our spiritual nature?
Yeah, well, specifically speaking in regards to religion, I in no way would ever bash it. I think there is a danger with a lot of the dogma. We just look around and you see all the wars that have been fought and are continuing to be fought, all of the death and murder and lives that have been lost in the name of God. It seems completely contradictory to me. But religion, before man kind of got his hands on it, I think it can be a very valuable kind of container in a way of people's spiritual experiences. I certainly will read some of the great wisdom tradition literature like the Gita or some of the Gnostic Gospels, the Dhammapada in Buddhism, or the Tao Te Ching. There's no shortage of great religious texts out there. But as I would encourage anyone to do as you're reading them, try to read them with your own experience and your own understanding. So I think there's ups and downs to it. But that's one of the things I love about the 12-step fellowships is that, though they do use the word God, they often, they just strongly encourage people to cultivate your own understanding of God, of a higher power. My friend Noah Levine just recently wrote a book called Refuge Recovery, and that's a Buddhist approach to the 12 steps because some people just, no matter what, can't deal with the word God, and right on. That's their experience, and I think Noah did a really valuable service for a lot of people. It's gotten a lot of great feedback, and there's refuge recovery meetings and around at least throughout the U.S. I don't know about the world yet, but so that's just another extension of cultivating your own understanding.
Have you ever run into any of the Edgar Cayce material in your studies?
Yeah, God, what was the book I read? Years ago. I had
River or The Sleeping Prophet.
Sleeping Prophet, that's the one I read. Now, this was years ago, so I'm not very well versed in it, but I do remember I read a lot about Edgar Cayce, and I was extremely fascinated. And I read that book, and I still have it somewhere, actually, and I loved it. But it is not something in recent years that I have been looking at.
Well, the reason I mention it, Michael and I are both students of the Edgar Cayce material and closely connected. I live in Houston, Texas, and there's a huge ARE center here that has just been completely renovated. And there is a growing understanding and acknowledgement of the body of work that he presented because of its correlation to what you're talking about, which is ancient or mystic, sort of not the traditional Christianity-based religion, but more of a universal concept that we're all one, that you mentioned earlier, and the law of one, the interconnectedness of all souls and all beings, seen, unseen, incarnated and not, even down to the molecular level of every drop of water, every breath of air, every rock, mineral, plant. We're all interconnected on the planet.
Right.
So, and that was kind of his philosophy, and it's stayed true to it's one thing that, if anything else, it's the only thing that everything seems to be changing constantly for me, but that one truth has remained the same. I stumbled into the ARE Center, early on after recovery, and just have kept it close to my heart because his information came from some kind of a source that, a divine source that he was able to sort of transmit back out and document in sort of modern time.
Yeah.
But I love the ancient traditions too that you're talking about. What do you think draws you to those? Is it just the clear information just resonates with you, or?
Yeah, I think so. I don't. The funny thing is, I don't read a lot of the newer teachers in spirituality. I mean, there are some that I certainly am a huge fan of, but overall, I find I spend most of my time with either the older school teachers like Ram Dass and Ken Wilber, or the older texts. And there's just something about it, that resonates very, very true for me, and I feel very connected in my heart chakra area as I'm reading these things. That's something I don't find with a lot of, not to say, again, not all of the new material by any means, because I do believe there's a lot of new teachers that are doing wonderful work. But I don't know, for me personally, it resonates. And I love the Ramana Maharshis and the Swami Vivekanandas, and there's just so many great people. The Swami Vivekananda, what an amazing mystic. He said, I don't remember verbatim, but something to the effect of, the one Rama has 1,000 different names. And, what he's saying is that however you come to know it, there's many different paths and religions, and that's great, but they all bring you to the same realization. He's not saying that they all say the same thing, because they don't, but at their core, as I said earlier, I believe the mystic traditions are pretty much in line with one another. And to me, that's the most authentic version of these religions is, the Zen in Buddhism, or the Kabbalah in Judaism, and mystic Christianity, things of that nature. So, yeah, I don't know. I just love it. But again, personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. However you can get down that path. I just have to ask you this because our show is a lot about multidimensional realities and the existence of life forms, on and off the Earth, all around the universe. We don't have to talk about it, but I mean, do you have any, feeling one way or the other about, life outside of Earth, extraterrestrial life?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to me, I think it's ignorant to believe there's not. It's such, the universe, you look at how vast it is. How could there not be? I've never had a direct experience with any kind of, UFO or alien life form, or, multiple dimensions, but absolutely, I'm not that well read in physics, so I love reading about it. I find it extremely fascinating. But in the bit, I've read from various theorists and things of that nature, there is no doubt, to me at least, that yes, absolutely, there is so much more going on, again, that we were talking about earlier, that we're not aware of. So yeah, I'm not, again, that well versed in this topic, but I have no doubt, personally, that there are, I believe, extraterrestrial life forms.
Maybe we are all extraterrestrials.
And yeah, who knows? I've heard many, many theories, and I mean, who am I to say nay to any of them? Even if it might not ring true or not, who knows? Like, but you're right. Maybe we are. You never
It makes
know.
you look at things in a new way, especially the beautiful animal life on this planet. I mean, the whales, dolphins, elephants, lions, I mean, insects, they're all just magnificent. I mean, it almost makes you look at everything differently when you start to think that, all these magnificent life forms are just in a different bodysuit than we are. That we're not as unique and, the superior beings, and that maybe we need to just rethink everything,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I've actually been reading a bit lately on a bit more neurochemistry in our brains, and this book that talks about a lot about the difference between humans and animals. And it's not saying humans are necessarily superior. It's just, we have that more evolved cortex, and but it's amazing how in tune animals are with things that obviously humans aren't, because we're so wrapped up in our heads most of the time. But you look at nature, and I mean,
they've survived for so long, right?
Right.
And have beautiful ways of living.
Yeah.
Just like the Native Americans and other cultures, the Incans, the Mayans, the ones that you're mentioning, the ancients, and then you can go way back to where I go, which is the civilizations of Atlantis in Lemuria, where cultures and societies thrived in different than how we are at this present. But there's all kinds of different ways to manifest yourself in this experience we call life. Right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love, I don't know if you've ever heard any of Gary Renard's stuff. But
Yeah.
it's just, I'm a fan of his stuff, and, he has no problem in his conversations with Art and Impersa talking about extra, terrestrial life and other planets. Drunvalo Malkovich, he does a lot of work that I'm a fan of.
You've done some amazing work on, the new species, the evolution of species.
Yeah.
The concept that we can embrace our DNA, our extraterrestrial origins and DNA, and make it part of our evolutionary process.
Yeah.
So it's all fascinating, right?
Agreed, completely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, what's your next book about?
It's called Everything Mind, and it comes out October 1st from Sounds True, which is a huge honor for me because they've been my favorite publisher for some time now. And it just goes deeper into where Indie Spirituals left off, and it goes deeper into a lot of these teachings, that have impacted me. It definitely talks about addiction and recovery, but it talks a lot about what we've been talking about today, the interconnectedness and some of the Buddhist teachings on emptiness and co-arising. It also explores some of the perennial philosophy and then, just the way I write, I always bring in things like some pop culture and counterculture and things of that nature. The foreword was written by Ken Wilber, who has been a significant teacher in my life. So that was such an honor for me to have him write that. So, that's in a nutshell. That's what it's about.
How much of the book was channeled?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. It'd be hard to put a percentage on. I feel like when I write, to be totally honest, I'm still very self-conscious of myself, so I would say that there's not a good percentage of it. I have a much easier time when I'm talking in environments like this to kind of let go of myself. Unfortunately, when I'm writing, I never went to school for writing, which still blows my mind that I have a second book coming out. I didn't even finish college, so that I see that play into my writing because I really am very critical of myself as I'm doing it. So unfortunately, I don't think much, just because I am, always I don't know if that sentence sounds good. I don't know if that paragraph's good. So I'm very self-conscious when I write. Hopefully, I'll get better with that.
You went to the school of hard knocks, though, Chris.
Yes.
Sometimes you learn a lot more there.
Well, that's the one thing that I do think I've seen play in my favor. A lot of the feedback I got from Indie Spirituals was how much readers appreciated just the rawness and the vulnerability that I expressed in that book. I figured that, hell, if I'm not a good writer, I might as well just lay it all out there as authentically and honestly as I can with no concern about what people are going to think of me. So that was kind of the trade-off for me, and so that's for lack of a better word, my strong suit, I guess, with writing, and that's cool because it resonates with people.
The intention, the perfection of the book is your intention in writing it, and so if you're doing this with the highest intention, which you are, then that's perfect in itself.
Yes, and thank you for saying that. I do agree with that. Really what I want to do is make sure I'm putting something out that's going to serve other people. So I think that's another reason why I'm so hard on myself, is that I want to make sure.
I got to just add one thing here because I'm listening to you, and I'm sorry for sounding like I'm preaching, but what I do is I start with the concept of love, as you do. But then it's with gratitude in my heart that I'm thanking Source for being a partner. So I'm never alone in doing that. So when I write, and I'll use a flooding technique, which means when I had to, at first, I would start with instrumental jazz and headphones and other things going. Yeah. So I'd get lost in it. And all of a sudden, it would go and go and go. And so it's priming the pump and then just letting it happen. So getting it out with that intention and knowing that even the things there, that I don't take credit for what I write because something is writing through me.
That's awesome.
Sorry about that. But,
I like that a lot. I think that's great.
and I'm coming from a musician standpoint, too.
Right, right.
And the flooding is, if you only have one thing to focus on, it's really hard to focus. If you allow more things to happen, like I never remember weather reports. So the Weather Channel is a great inspiration to write for me.
Very interesting. I think that's awesome.
But you're doing well by yourself, so I don't need to, preaching to the choir.
He's throwing it out there. Michael's written about a dozen books, and he has two new fiction books that are about ready to come out. So, writing is there's a lot of fun in it. And hearing you say that you're surprised to have your second book coming out is funny, because probably every author that ever put a book out and had a follow up probably thought the same thing, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a calling, and I am so impressed at the fact that all these people are endorsing this book. I mean, did you ever meet Tony Hawk, the skateboarding icon? Because that would be fun.
No, I didn't. But the funny thing there is that when I was about 8 years old, so we're going back to 1986, I fell in love with skateboarding at a very, very early age, and he quickly became my favorite skateboarder. And this was before he was like the Tony Hawk.
He's the one with the bright red hair, the orange hair.
He's just today he's just an average guy. Looks like a normal dad, tall, skinny guy.
I might be thinking, what I'm thinking of is a snowboarder. Yeah,
a snowboarder.
Yeah. Oh, shoot! I know you're talking about, but yes, I'm.
Yeah. So this guy is a skateboarder. Yeah, I remember that they had skateboarding parks where you would go up and flip the board and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That looked really dangerous. I raised 4 kids. I didn't encourage skateboarding with anybody.
Yeah, my parents didn't encourage it either, but they knew they couldn't stop me. But I haven't met him, but I wrote him when I was 8 years old, and he wrote me back, and to this day I still have the postcard with his autograph. And it was really cool for that to happen. It came full circle for me in a way. And
oh my gosh, how cool is that, right?
Yeah, really, it meant a lot. And that's like a lot of those other endorsements, like the Ram Dass thing. Like he and Ken Wilber have been the two most important teachers for me on my path. So to have that endorsement, and I got to interview him a while back, and then Ken Wilber to write the foreword of the new book. It's just God, how do I make sense of it?
So you interviewed Ram Dass?
Yeah, in 2013, I got to do a Skype interview with him when his last book, Polishing the Mirror, came out. And then actually just last month, he's the Love Serve Remember Foundation that, is his foundation. They have a wonderful new endeavor called the MindPod Network, where it's a podcast network that features Ram Dass, a podcast from him, and then one from Krishna Das, Jack Kornfield, and Sharon Salzberg, and they reached out to me to do my own podcast with their network.
Oh my God!
So that's starting next month. But that was another one of those. Geez, like really? How
you're like the voice of the indie spiritualist coming alive here for everyone.
Yeah, I know, and that's even what the podcast is going to be called, the Indie Spiritualist Podcast. But it's just so seriously, it's surreal, and I'm not just saying that. It's like, how in the hell did this all happen? But I'm super grateful for it, and I'll do whatever I can to use it to again just be of service to help others, and pick themselves back up and find hope and greater self-compassion, things of that nature.
Do you think we're born with a purpose?
Yes, I do. Now, if we quiet ourselves enough to get in touch with that purpose is another story. But sure, I think we all are here to do something. I personally do believe in reincarnation, so I believe that, it's an ongoing process, and, we definitely have karma we're cleaning up and hopefully not creating too much more for ourselves in the process. But yeah, I believe, aside from that, that we're all here to do something or some things, for sure.
Do you think you were a warrior in the past?
Who knows? I mean, the Buddhists believe that we have had so many lives that they put it like this, like you've lived so many times that every single person in this world at one point or another has been your mother in a past life. That's a Buddhist way of looking at it.
Then I would have been your mother, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, I'm honored. I am so honored by that.
Well, I would have been your mother, too, at some point.
Oh, right. Okay, good.
It's just, Yeah, so sure, I could have been a warrior and a murderer and a lover and all the good and the bad. Quite
it's
possible.
a duality system on Earth right now, so we have to experience the light and the dark, to drive us closer to divine, I think. And that's what I think people don't understand about the dark, is that the dark is a very beneficial thing. Once you understand and embrace it, and your dark side becomes, you own it. You own your shadow.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's so important. And that I write a lot about that actually in the new book. And absolutely, it's such a great teacher. Ram Dass said, suffering is the sandpaper of our incarnation. It does its job of shaping us. And I thought that was great, and not just suffering per se, but this darkness. And because...
Well, and then blessing, and then taking it one step further and blessing any perpetrators or any, you write in your book about Hitler and about, some of the other, evilness of society, and we have to bless that dark side of humanity as well as the light, and bring it all, right?
Right, yeah, because underneath the form is the formless, and in that formless state, it's non-dual. There is no separation, and we all come out of that formlessness, that whatever you want to call it, the Dharmakaya in Buddhism, or the Godhead in Christianity, Brahman in Hinduism. It has many names, but it's all pointing back to the same thing, and it all comes from that place, and it's all connected in that place. So even the worst monsters on this world, and I'm not making excuses. I'm no fan of Hitler. He was a monster. But underneath that physical form and that ego, there is an essence that we all share. And I know at face value that's hard for some people to hear and to say, yeah, I get that. But once you have these experiences, literal, very real experiences of non-duality, then it begins to make sense in a way that words can't really.
Well, the people that push through, I think the farthest in their their quest for not going back into rehab, having a relapse, is their ability for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that is a big part of that whole process, because when you can forgive yourself and forgive others, no matter what, on an unconditional basis, and that's the only way you can find self-love.
Yeah. Yep.
I saw people struggling with that, and I struggled, and it is for some reason for us.